Shot is no good. Rebounded by Anthony. 2 seconds left. Anthony for the win. Grady throws it. Cole Anthony gives the Magic a victory.
Close-up Magic.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Close-Up Magic. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, and today we have a really fun show for you. We got Stone, Hansen, and Malik Grady, the draft experts that we have on this show today to break down all the ins and outs of the NBA draft in consideration for the Orlando Magic. It's going to be a fun show. These guys know the draft like crazy, and I respect them a lot, and it's going to be a fun conversation. But before we get to that conversation, let's get into the housekeeping of this show. We are recording this on June 1st at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Yes, in the middle of game one, but it's okay. The Nuggets were up by like 17 last I look. AG was crushing it. It's going to be a fun series. I got Nuggets in 5. Honestly, maybe even 4. I don't have a whole lot of faith in the Heat, and that's not a ding because like the Heat are a rival of the Magic. I don't really care. It's more so I'm just that psyched on this Nuggets team. But we ain't here to talk about the finals. This is just when we're recording it. To carry on, this podcast is brought to you by 19 Media. They do dope things. They have a lot of dope podcasts. Basketball podcast, obviously like this one, Baseline show. There's a Lakers show, a couple other good ones, wrestling. There's tons of good content on the 19 Media. They're about to hit their 2-year anniversary, so there's going to be some fun stuff planned to celebrate that 2-year anniversary network birthday. So stay tuned to this show and the socials to stay up to tune with what we're doing with that big day. They also do cool things like get us sponsors. So one thing I'm going to mention, if you are in the mood to buy some new NBA gear from the NBAshop.com, hit the affiliate link in the bio or in the show description. It's an affiliate link. If you buy something from them, if you need a new jersey, new Nuggets jersey or Heat jersey or Orlando Magic jersey, gives me a tiny bit of a kickback. Lets the NBA shop know that their affiliate with me is a successful partnership. It's cool. So go ahead and check that out if you like. And obviously do all the cool things like rate and review and subscribe and all that other shit. So without further ado, we're going to bring up Stone and Malik. Stone, Malik, hello, how's it going? Stone, you are one of the co-hosts of the Upside Swing podcast. Malik, you are a Orlando Magic aficionado and friend of the podcast. Welcome. How are you both doing this evening? I'll pass it to you first, Stone.
I'm doing great. I've had, you're now like the 4th podcast I've had today. So I'm just grinding out all that sort of stuff. Loving every minute of it and excited to be on here because I actually, even though I don't say that I'm a Magic fan, they're probably like my second favorite team in the league. I love watching them.
That's awesome. I imagine you're quite busy. A lot of the draft people are very busy this time of the year doing podcast appearances and writing articles and creating their own content as well. So I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to connect with us. 4. I've never done more than like 2 in a day. So keep going, get some good rest. Malik, what's going on with you, man? Thanks for joining.
Not much, man. I really enjoy Stone and his colleagues with Upside Swings because they really get into the film. They don't have any problem crushing a guy or building a guy up off someone else's board, which is just really refreshing because so many of us, no matter how much we don't want to be, end up being kind of pulled by groupthink and wanting to follow what everyone else is thinking. And these guys, they're their own people and stuff. And, they don't get influenced unduly by that stuff. So it's a lot of fun to talk with them, get that fresh insight when it comes to the draft.
Yeah, it's great. And speaking of that fresh insight, the way we're going to kind of do this is I'm going to ask questions to Malik and Stone, give them an opportunity to be the experts and talk back to us. I'm probably going to ask Stone some questions first, just to hear some like unbiased approach that is not necessarily connected to the Magic, and then allow Malik, who has a little bit more of a fandom to the team connection and just thought process of how this team has been building and some more of their like theory behind like this organization to respond. And then I'll chime in as I can and need to. So Stone, let's start this off with a little bit of a theoretical question. The Magic have pick 6, pick 11, and pick 36 in this draft. Now this episode is mostly focused on the first round, but we'll talk a little about just the second round and just the theory of these picks. Going into this draft, there's been some rumors of the Magic maybe trading back, trading out, maybe using both or all 3 picks. If you're the Magic, like front office, and you have to make a decision and a strategy, and let's say you do have opportunity to trade in or out and kind of make moves that make sense, what is your philosophy going into this draft based on where the Magic are at with their team building and their direction that you think they're going in next year?
Yeah, for sure. I think the Magic have, in my opinion, the best foundation of young talent in the league. And I think adding somebody that really elevates all of that foundation is idealistic for this team. You may already have that with Paolo and Franz, but you can never have too much of that, I guess you could say. So if you have the opportunity to say move up where it's rumored that, like number 3 may be available, if you have the opportunity to do 6 and 11 and whatever else may get you there outside of your real building blocks, I would take that personally. I would go for that optimal talent that can raise everybody's ceiling, even despite fit issues or whatever you may have with shooting. I think he's that level of talent that it would really make a lot of sense for the Magic. And outside of the draft, just any players in the league that you feel somewhat the same way about, that can really just put this team sort of in a place where everyone can be at their best and really elevate everyone, I think is ideal. I don't mind keeping 6 and 11 either for them. They obviously have a treasure trove of youth. And I think if you can get the right players at 6 and 11, you can only add to that and make yourself, more interesting and add to that collection of talent as you grow internally. That's not a bad thing either. A lot of teams that end up being successful are there because over the course of several years have grown internally and built around their guys. I think Franz and Paolo, I sort of view as that as your building blocks. And for me personally, the way I approach the draft is if you feel you have those long-term building blocks with your team, as the Magic do, you want to pick not only based on how those players can best fit, but how you make those franchise building blocks, how you can optimize them and make them their best. I think that's most important for a team, and how you build a team is how can I get my best players in the best situations while not sacrificing the talent in the draft that gets me to that point. So that's generally how I view the draft and how I would view the draft if I were a Magic fan.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Before I really give my thoughts, Malik, I'm just going to pass that same question to you. There's 2 picks at 6 and 11, and 36. We have this foundation with Paolo and Franz, but also, this is just it's an opportunity. I'm just going to leave it at that. What is your thoughts going into this draft, just on the utilization of these picks and how you might, your theory and approach on how you would go with building out this team with these picks?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I feel similarly to how Stone has expressed himself. I feel like obviously, you want 6 and 11 primarily to be able to underscore whatever Franz and Paolo bring. For me, there are maybe 1 or 2 players that I would target in the draft that I would be willing to move 6 and 11 to go get. The other players I think are similar enough to what you could get at 6 that I would not spend that extra capital. I just kind of stockpile that and, allow that to kind of, build. I think that the specific needs that this team needs, obviously shooting, rebounding, rim protection, But you don't have to get those things in this draft. Obviously, you'd like to. But the biggest thing is you want to just raise the overall, like a rising tide rises all boats. I think that's kind of what Stone was trying to say, is that if you get the overall, player or players, then everybody elevates and you can do some special things. So that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it going into the draft. I expect them to be ready for anything. Like they're going to interview a lot of players, be ready to move up, move down, move out. And that's what I appreciate about this front office, that they're going to be ready to do anything, but they're going to be conservative, probably more conservative than we'd like. We'd love to have fireworks. There probably will not be fireworks, but I think they'll at least be ready for it. And that's good enough for me at this point.
That's cool. We'll get a little bit more like into those theories towards the end of the podcast, where after we talk about a few players, like we'll just kind of go in like our dream scenario. We'll do like a pick at each position, and then we'll also just do like our dream scenario if things were willing to work out, how you would actually utilize them. So, at least within theory or just ideation. When Stone, I'm going to pass this to you again. When you are looking at this draft class, particularly the lottery half of the class, and you compare it to others, you compare it to maybe some futures, what is just like the kind of overall vibes of this class? Obviously, we all knew like the big name, Wemby, and like how awesome the Spurs are with landing the number 1 pick and whatnot. But like outside of him, there was some like high talk about Scoot in the beginning, where it was like, oh, it's the Wemby and then Scoot. Now Brandon Miller's like up there with Scoot. And then it's just kind of like this, in my opinion, a little bit of a clusterfuck from like 4 to like 11 or 12, where it just seems like there's not a ton that separates a lot of it. Doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing, but that's just my early observations of this class. Is that true? Like, what's your feeling just going into this class and the strength of it and how it kind of lines up with other classes?
Yeah, I think this is a very strong class at the top, is how I view it. I think there's, in most cases, within the past maybe 8 years or so, I would say 6 or 7 of those classes, I'd probably be taking Scoot number 1. Victor's just that tier of generational type talent that I would, take him 2 in this class particularly. I like Amen Thompson quite a bit. I think where I divulge with some people is I'm not quite as high on his brother, Asar, even though I still view him as a first-round talent. But overall, I think the lottery is very strong. I think, I don't have Brandon Miller number 3, but I think that he's still a very good player. And I think all the way up through like number 12, there's real strong potential for, in my eyes, like 12 guys to be starting and closing caliber, like playoff type guys, which I think is pretty deep in consideration to or comparison to most classes. And a lot of guys pulled out yesterday at the withdrawal deadline, but overall, I think the depth of this class is fairly decent. It's not as deep as some other classes that I've seen, but it's not terrible either. So I think just comparatively, it does come out to being a pretty strong class, because generally I think we view, the top as the most important part of the class, and rightly so. And I think that this is about as good of a top end of the class as we've seen in recent years.
Cool. That's exciting. Malik, what about you, man? What do you think of this class?
Well, it's interesting. I was actually I was trying to pull up your big board, Stone, and I think I actually had initially had up a board you had retweeted of a friend of yours a moment ago. So I'm kind of getting that cognitive dissonance out of the way. So it's interesting. Like you said, Wemby is number 1, and then you have Scoot. And for me, what I was hinting at before is that the one player that I would trade up for if it was available, that I would trade up for Scoot Henderson, even though the fit wouldn't be perfect for this team. And I think Steven is kind of in a similar place to me in terms of thinking that highly of Scoot. Yeah. The other guys, like you said, Brandon Miller, other guys like that, I think they're kind of in the mix with everyone else, and that if we select right or if they develop right, they're going to be right there with other guys that we can pick. So in terms of how I view this, I'm glad we got Paolo last year, because it kind of frees us up in my mind to be able to pick the best player and make the best situation. Like if we get a great situation or a great trade, we can just go on it and know that, hey, we have our guys in place. Now, maybe we will be proven wrong a couple of years, like, oh man, we should have gone for fill in the blank, Gigi Jackson or whatever it is, some crazy name. But at the moment, this seems sensible, and we can go forward with it, which feels nice.
Now, you guys can roast me if you'd like, and so can the listeners. From what I know, and again, I admitted at the beginning of this podcast, and I've said it a bunch online, I'm not nearly as informed as I normally am on the draft at this time of the year, playing a lot of catch up. But from what the bits and pieces that I have created opinions on, I'm at the point where it's like, all right, I like our team. I worry that we can get too young. And I do value experience and veterans, especially for a team that I think wants to try and win next season. And then I look at the draft capital that we have. We have another second round pick, which hopefully we'll use to, improve this team in some way or another. With the addition of the two-way, makes a lot of sense to try and get someone that might sign that. We have the 2 first round picks. I'm one of the people that almost wanted the Bulls pick to not convey. Simply because, and I'll say that simply because I feel like the talent difference between 6 and 11 is not all that different. And I would rather have extra trade ammunition in another season to then be able to throw at a bigger move for this team, because I don't think we're going to go make a consolidation trade that includes a couple second round or a couple good picks to go get a guy, right? We might make some trades to improve the team, but maybe not some that require including first round picks. And I have a little bit more attachment to our picks. We only have one extra after this season. And I tend to think that first round picks have a little bit more value players most of the time, right? Unless the player just crushes their draft position. So that's sort of my view on this draft. Now, granted, I'll be fine if we use both picks. I'm not going to be upset. It'll be a great way to improve this team long term. I do worry about some of the success goals it could have on this team next year and what their goals might be on as far as winning. But, in a couple of years, it shouldn't really matter if the development path works out right and they continue to shape this team organically and properly with the right moves. Now, we've gotten some theory stuff out and some just thought process on approaching to this draft. I want to get into it, man. Pick 6, Stone. Give me one player that you really like for the Magic at this area. Give us a little 2-minute synopsis on who they are, what kind of player they are, and how they might be able to fit with this roster. And also, before that, give me your approach to this. Are you best player available? Are you gearing a little bit more towards fit? What's your theory and thought here with this guy and why you might like them?
Yeah, for sure. So like I said at the beginning, I think it's as much as getting the talent as it is optimizing your building blocks and the talent you already have. I'm not necessarily staunchly, best player available or complete on the other side of best fit available. I think there's a way to split the difference in the middle. And I think that is getting the player that is the best talent, but it's the best talent for your team. And I think that for me, that happens to be Cam Whitmore in that 6th position. As sort of
talking about him. I don't know anything about him. He's on my list of people I want to look up in the next couple of days. So let's hear Cam Whitmore. Yeah,
for sure. For the record, I would say Brandon Miller would be awesome here. I just don't really see a pathway to him, dropping to 6. I think Whitmore is somebody that is an awesome off-ball player, one of the best cutters in this draft. And when you have guys like Paolo and Franz that can find those sort of players on the move, I think it optimizes both parties like I was talking about. I think that the shooting is something some people are hesitant on. And, the shooting numbers weren't great this season, but when you just watch him, nothing's bad about it. I think the mechanics are all fine. He's very comfortable taking them. He's taking them off the dribble. I think that just maybe reps and development need to come with that. But the Magic are at a stage I think they can afford that. I don't think they're, gunning for a championship next season or anything. So I think they're in a position that they could, well, maybe they're in a position that they could, wait a little bit and be a little patient for that to come around. But the passing is the big thing that a lot of people pick on, the decision-making and playmaking with Cam Whitmore. That's like the big knock on him. I don't really see it as a necessity for his success in the NBA. I don't think that he has to be a high-level playmaker for who he can be as an NBA player. I think he's very much a strong scorer, and I think he does a good enough job leveraging that scoring as a passer. If he gets the help, he's going to pass out of it. If he sees someone closing out hard on him, he's going to attack it. I think he just makes the simplistic decision, nothing overly complex. And I think he does miss some things, but when the majority of the playmaking duties are in Paolo and Franz's hands, I don't really see that as big of an issue as I would maybe for another team. So I think for me, he's the best talent available. He's also really big, plays defense on the wing quite well. I think he's one of the better wing defenders in this class. So you can play massive and have, him at the 2, Franz at the 3, and Paolo at the 4, and Wendell at the 5, and you can just throw out massive lineups, which the Magic already like to do. So I think that it makes a lot of sense, and I think he also fits with the other guys, even if the shooting isn't exceptional. I think he's a really strong off-ball player.
Now, I was listening to another podcast this morning. I was actually listening to the Sixth Man Show, fellow Orlando Magic podcast. They do a great job over there. They had Richard Stayman on, and who I also love, and he's a great dude, and he's been on our show as well. But when they were talking about Cam Whitmore, he had a thought, and again, everyone's got their own approach. There's no right or wrong answer here, but he said Cam was someone he had a little bit more of like boom or bust vibes with. Stone, and I was driving and I wasn't paying a ton of attention there, but like, why do you think Richard might have said that? And do you view Cam in some of that way, or do you feel like he's got like pretty solid foundation to where like the bust factor is not as much of a concern for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love Rich. I talk with him quite frequently, and I respect a lot of his opinions. We don't agree on everything. Not every player, not every analyst or evaluator does. And that's okay. That's totally fine. I think for me, there's not a whole lot of bust potential, because I think when you're a big wing that can defend a few different positions, and also score, even if it's not from 3 at this point, I buy the shot long term, I think, more than a lot of people. And I think that confidence in that shot maybe elevates him to a lesser of a bust degree than other people. But I also think that even if the shot is, say, like 33-34% on spot ups, like not great, not completely awful, but I think he does enough as an off-ball guy, as a finisher. I think he's going to be like a free throw menace. I think he's so big in the way he gets to the rim and attacks the rim. I think it gives him sort of a baseline foundation of a two-way player, even if the playmaking instincts and the shooting never come around to a high level. I think there's enough there to be a serviceable like playoff rotation player in the worst case scenarios.
I think something that you said about Cam that was really attractive to me, as again someone who's going to go read about him a lot more in the next couple of days and watch some tape, is you talked about being able to play next to Franz and Paolo. And for me, like when I look at this roster and I look at the people that the Magic are pretty much committed to and seem to be invested in, Markelle Fultz, obviously Franz and Paolo, Wendell Carter Jr. There's some question marks on who might fill that 2 spot, but there's like the starting role, at least for the next couple of years, seems pretty locked unless they make some crazy trade or don't re-sign someone which I can't predict at this time. And so finding someone that has the ability to play within that group is really important to me, because what I don't like or love the idea of is drafting someone at 6 and not giving them a pathway to be to grow into the ultimate role, right? Like being stuck in the second unit, yeah, it helps our depth, but it hurts that player individually in the long run. And so I really like that you said that about him. And I think that's like, I think you did a really good job, and now I'm sold and I want Cam Whitmore. Malik, I'm going to pass this over to you, man. What's a player not named Cam Whitmore that you really like at 6 for the Magic? Give us a little introduction here.
Well, I do want to touch quickly on Cam for a moment. When Stone talks about Cam Whitmore years ago, probably before y'all's time, but Gary Payton was in a big commercial kind of thing about the basketball police and that kind of thing. And they had this one commercial where they came into the guy's home and they were talking to this kid saying, you know, this kid, you got to go to the basketball jail. Say, look at this basketball. There's only one set of fingerprints on it, yours. And they took the kid to basketball jail. And to me, that's what I think of with Cam Whitmore, because, you know, for right or wrong, look at the stats, the dude does not pass. But he's like, hey, you know, if I'm putting the ball in the basket, why should I have to pass and stuff? So I kind of understand it. So anyway, it's just kind of a fun thought with that, is that if he's as good as he thinks he is and he has been, does he really need to pass? Because he's not passing right now. Maybe he's going to be the receiver when it comes to Franz and Paolo. But sure. The one guy that has been on my mind, and I talked about it on, you know, Stone's podcast a couple weeks ago when we talked for the Magic at 6, has been Sir Thompson, because I've kind of had this love affair with maybe at least one of the twins for the Magic for at least over a year. Kind of similar to why I felt about Tyrese Halliburton a couple years ago. I wished he would come to the Magic. I thought it was a great fit and that kind of thing. What's interesting to me is that when you look at Stone's board, he actually has Asur all the way at 20. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of factors going into that. So it's kind of interesting that he maybe is more of a boom bust potential type of a guy. And part of that is because the shooting, you're hoping it comes around. We've seen progress, but if it doesn't come around, especially for the Magic, that might be a real problem for a team that needs shooting and that is looking to prioritize it. This would be that big home run swing at 6. I would definitely take him there if he's there. There's some rumblings of other teams being enamored of him. He may not even be there at 6 anymore. He might already be gone because other teams are starting to see that potential. He's also a little bit older. So if you believe that he's already done all this work on the shot and it's still not great, you might think, oh my gosh, if he's already had a year and a half of intense study trying to get better on the shot and it's not there yet, maybe you don't think it's ever going to be there. But I just think this front office is going to have a hard time passing on a guy with his tools, with his work ethic, with the way he interviews, the way he competes at 6. And I think there's a great path for him to work out, starting off the bench as at the big hole when it comes to all the minutes for small forward, when it comes to playmaking, when it comes to athleticism, when it comes to the defense that Mosley, the coach for the Magic, likes to play. And then there's a path for him. Whichever position gets moved around, whichever position blossoms, he could progress to the 1, the 2, or the 3. Because I think just like his brother Amen, he has potential as a playmaker to maybe be a point guard. Potentially at the 2 to be such a big physical mismatch defensively, you could play him at the 2. And of course, at the 3, whether he's next to Franz and Paolo, allowing them to play up positions or down position, that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of things you can do with him, especially if you pair him with a player at 11 who might be a little more of a fit guy. It might be more of a floor guy. So I don't have any qualms. I don't have any hesitation for Sir Thompson at 6. I know others do, and I do understand that. Because for me, you know, if you take a guy like Grady Dick, a shooter who to me is more of just a shooter, to me that's scarier than a guy like Asur, to me, who has, even at his floor, he's just poor man's, you know, and Andrew Wiggins, which I would love here. We have not had that kind of athlete here in some time. So Sir Thompson is the guy that I would target at number 6 if he's there. We get a chance.
Stone, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely get the thought process behind Sir Thompson. That's the biggest thing for me is, even if I disagree numerically with a guy like who may be on my board, if I can understand the process of why a team would make that pick, I'm generally for it. I think with Asar, it makes sense to bring in someone that you'd take a big swing on, that you believe has that potential to be like a real difference-making franchise type star. I know some people have him higher than his brother Amen. There's people that believe that. I am not there, but I understand that people do think that. And if they do think that, I'm totally fine with the pick. I personally am a bit lower, probably lower than like the vast majority of people. I think most people have him lottery.
I have 3 and 20 is the biggest gap that I've seen, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And I understand, a lot of people I've gotten a lot of DMs asking me like, what is wrong with you? I think the big thing for me is I view Amin as a very special playmaker and creator. I view Asar as a lesser processor of how quickly he could see things in the half court setting. So to me, that might view him more as a connective role, and there's nothing innately wrong with that. I think you can have a lot of value in that sort of role. The skepticism more for me is I don't buy his shot all that more than his brothers. I think I buy them. I don't buy them equally. I don't really buy either of them being that much of an outside threat. And when you're in more of a connective role and you don't have a shot, I think it limits what you could do in that sort of role. So that's generally my reasoning as to why I'm a bit lower on Asar, even though I still have him top 20, which I don't hate the guy. I still think he's a good player. I just don't view him in the same sort of light that I do his brother. Yeah.
I like the Twins. Their athleticism is undeniably like amazing. Their defensive upside seems very, very real. Their offense seems, they're different offensive players. But it's there. I just don't know. Again, I don't know if I believe the shot. I don't know. And there's just some like rawness to these players where I'm a little heartbroken by some of the way our raw players have been developed in Orlando. And don't necessarily always agree with like how the Magic approach developing more raw players. So I just like, I don't know if we have the time or I have the time to deal with that because I'm just not sure the front office will eventually give it the patience. So, the patience or the pathway, a little bit of both there. So, but anyways, I wouldn't be upset if we went there either because like there are some people and sometimes depending on the day and where I'm feeling like, he seems like, how the mock draft goes, like he might be the best player available or best upside player available and that could be really dope too. So like I don't necessarily hate that approach to going after a player either. Let's jump into pick 11. All right, we've hit 6 pretty well. Let's hit 11, then we'll get in some fun situations at the end. Stone, 11, what's your thought process going into pick 11, assuming the Magic also use pick 6? We're just going to kind of play this lottery straight, and then what's a player you like with this pick?
Yeah. So to me, if you're the Magic, I addressed you want to play to your best player's strengths. Even so, let's say I took Cameron Moore at 6. I think you want to come out with one of these picks with some sort of knockdown shooter in a class that is filled with them. I don't think you want to walk away from this class as a team that struggles a bit with shooting. Not coming away with a shooter when there's a lot in this sort of range. So I think at 11, I would definitely target one of them. For me, I would probably go with Grady Dick. I think he, to me, is one of the best shooters in this class. It's splitting hairs, really, to who the best shooter is in this class. They're all elite. But I think he offers a lot as a rotational defender. I think that's the big thing for me in terms of, when people ask what else is he besides a shooter, well, to me, he provides a lot of value defensively. He's not the best on-ball defender. I'll give everybody that. But I think as an off-ball defender, he processes things really well and quick to the help, quick to recover. Rotationally, one of the better rotation defenders I think I've ever evaluated in terms of how quickly he rotates and sees things. He can do more with the ball than just shoot. I think he leverages his shooting in crafty ways. There's guys that double team him or close him out hard because they know how prolific of a shooter he is. And a lot of times he's not like inept as an athlete. He can still get downhill and get towards the rim and put up floaters. I think he could finish fairly well. He's not he's not a bad athlete. He's kind of a lob threat even. So there's other ways to utilize him than just be like a spot up shooter in the corner. I think he's really crafty with his jab steps. There's a lot of craft to his game because the athleticism isn't super elite. And I think he utilizes that craft really well. So I think you want to come away with a player whose main strength is shooting. But for me, Grady Dick offers even more than that. And I'd be pretty happy to get him at 11 if I were a Magic fan.
I got a question for you there. And this is just a thought looking back at past drafts, right? Now, Grady is, unless I'm missing something, he's probably, like you said, the best shooter in this draft. I look back at past drafts at some of the best shooters, and some of them have worked out awesome. And some of them have not, particularly like Aaron Naismith, who, you know, you would think would come in with his ridiculous, awesome shooting and just crush it in the NBA, playing off ball of these great big wing defenders and passers and playmakers. And, you know, he's just hitting open shots. And I think he played a little bit better this year once he got over into the Pacers, but, you know, it took him a while. Then I look at Moses Moody, who, you know, I think in realistically, his is probably more situational, just like weird situation with the Warriors. The Warriors this last year, like really weird culture stuff, but also like young guys in a team that is expecting to win championships. Just
up and down minutes and stuff.
Ultimate, yeah. Like development path. So like, but again, like still kind of didn't really crush it as a freshman, you know, showed signs of life as a sophomore, didn't really crush it as a freshman. Are there any chances that Grady like kind of like happens to be in one of those situations where like his shooting just doesn't translate to the NBA, at least not in the first couple of years?
I'll say that there's never a 100% guarantee for any skill. Like I don't think there's ever, you can say this player is going to do that, but you can be pretty confident in a player doing that. Like I feel very confident Grady's going to be a good shooter. I think he showed it, and there's a lot of indications outside of just shooting that a player is going to be a good shooter. Obviously, everyone says free throws, but there's floaters, there's touch on three-pointers. Like the difference between a good shooter who is getting his shots like wide open, and a lot of them are because they are other players are double teamed and they're getting shots and they're hitting it off the rim. There's touch. You could say there's touch on three-pointers. Like most of Grady Dick's are just like flat out swishes, very pure. And that does matter to a degree. Like the amount of touch that goes into that, I think, is a factor. So I really do think he's going to be a high-level shooter. The other aspects of his game to me are probably what I'm less confident in, to be honest with you, like the defense. Even though I think it's very strong rotationally, I think there's pathways for him to be problematic because of the lack of on-ball defense. But I think ultimately, like I said, if they have the ability to address a need, and to me, coming away with a player that does that, especially at this position where I think I have Grady 9th on my board. So to get him at 11, it's still good value, but also a player that fits what you need. Sure. I think for me, that's where I would lie with him. And I would take that chance regardless, I think.
And just because I bring up that question doesn't mean I'm like anti Grady Dick. Like I think would be an awesome person for us to pick for the Magic if he's available, and that's the way the front office wants to go. Like that'd be great. And you know, with the gravity that Paulo and Franz make in the paint, you know, there shouldn't be any issue with him getting open shots when he is on the floor next to them. So that would, I think that would be an awesome selection and someone I would welcome on this team too. Malik, any quick thoughts on Grady? And if not, then what is your thought process with pick 11? And then who is a player you like with that pick?
Well, I kind of have the similar thought process. Obviously, if I had taken Asur at 6, there'd be more of a priority or, imperative that I get that shooter to kind of match him with at 11. And I do think there'll be guys there. Grady Dick would be a prime candidate. Other guys that I think are going to be good shooters in the league and be important would be Bryce Sensabaugh and Taylor Hendricks, even Kobe Buffkin, if we're going that route. Those are all guys that I would consider. my ideal draft would be like Taylor Hendricks. I'm not sure if he'll be there because I think teams once again are getting higher on them. If Dallas doesn't trade their pick at number 10, for example, I think they would take him. However, in this ideal scenario where maybe I'm pulling strings, maybe I'm selling a bit of my soul here and there to get guys to drop that I want, Taylor Hendricks would be the guy that I would want because he not only brings shooting, despite maybe not have the most orthodox form, he also brings rim protection. He also brings great character, great leadership. He also puts some pressure on the rim as a vertical spacer. And there's even some upside in terms of positional versatility and maybe kind of getting on the rim with the ball. I mean, right now he's not showing anything but straight line drives, but there's that Jabari Smith-ish path to the show and go and getting to the rim and drawing fouls, that kind of stuff. So that's the guy that I would like the most. Bryce Sensabaugh is a guy that I think will actually be there. He scares me a little bit because his defense was.
Sorry, who is this?
A young man named Bryce Sensabaugh. He kind of has the same shape as Cam Whitmore in that 6'6", 235, but he doesn't really move all that well defensively. So guys just kind of go around him. I think Stone would probably agree with that. But offensively, just an incredible shot maker, great touch, inside and outside, that kind of thing. Had some injury problems in high school. We had a couple surgeries, that kind of stuff. So once again, you get kind of getting into some of the scary parts for a Magic player that we've had in the past. So, ideally you wouldn't have to go for that, but I'm glad that Stone seems to feel similar to me, that some of the other players between 6 and 11 on the board that are skilled, but don't seem to be the shooters that we expect, whether it's Anthony Black, whether it's Cason Wallace, or even Nick Smith. Those are guys to me that for the Magic to kind of avoid, guys that are skilled, but it's like we need guys that can shoot rather than everything but shoot everything. If we're going to go for a guy that's a smaller guard, I would say just go for a guy like Kobe Buffkin, who's on the same team as Jet Howard, who's another Michigan guy. But to me, he's better than Jet Howard, because he has more skills. And like, if you're going to someday move on from Suggs or Cole, that kind of thing, that's how you go. But again, just boiling it down, Taylor Hicks, who I would like to go for, I would settle for Grady Dick or that kind of thing. But I think that'd be a great pick, especially with Asar Thompson, again, to just kind of have a shooter and a floor guy with, the kind of big name, exciting highlight guy. So that's what I would go for.
Both those strategies and players that you've said are people that I have, been informed about and have opinions on, and I like both of them for the Magic. If they were to end up on the team at 11, that would be awesome, or some other formation of it. I wouldn't complain too much. I'm not sure I would take either one of them at 6. It feels a little bit of a reach for both of them, but at 11. That seems like a great option if either one of them were there and available for us to land on the Magic. They definitely have. This Magic team has to address shooting in multiple ways, not just the draft, but it is one of the ways they need to address it, right? In the draft, internal development, and even in free agency. Like you can't just draft one player and have that fix all the spacing problems this team has. Right. There needs to be a lot more to it, in my opinion. And coming away with one or two players, if they use both picks, would be phenomenal for it. So,
it's interesting, Stephen. There's the other position that a lot of Magic fans and people looking at the team have looked at is big man, whether it's backup 4, backup 5, or even a replacement for WCJ at some point, or a 4 that can allow you to let Franz and Paolo kind of move up in position. Sure. I'm really curious as to what Stone thinks about kind of 3 players, whether it's Jarris Walker, Derek Lively, and even Leonard Miller, guys who would be a little bit out of the box, whether they're at 6 or 11, probably 11. But how would those guys individually might be fit with the Magic?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How would they not? Or is it like, man, just don't go for the bigs, just go for these skilled wings, even though you have all these wings? Like Leonard Miller is a guy that I had meant to mention with you guys when I spoke with you a couple weeks ago, but he doesn't quite have the rim protection, but doesn't quite have the outside shooting, but everything else he's really intriguing to me as a guy who keeps rising up that board and might eventually be in that 11 range. And obviously similar with Derek Lively, keeps rising even though he seems like he can't score at all. Maybe that doesn't matter anymore in the NBA. I don't know.
And even Walker, like he's this big body defender that is like really impressive and on the defensive end. Like, Malik, that's a great question. I also have similar questions about your approach with that too, Stone.
Obviously.
I think so. With all three players, I am admittedly just lower than consensus on all those three guys. but as far as the process, right, of the Magic taking any one of them, I'm outside of maybe his family, the biggest Wendell Carter Jr. fan. Like, I think he's such a good center. I would not be in a rush to just get rim protection just to get rid of Wendell at the expense of getting Wendell, I should say. I think so. To start with Lively, like I know there's a lot of buzz recently with the pro day. He had like a lot of shooting. To me, that does not mean a whole lot when you have like a whole track record of him as a player. The shot was more definitely predominant in high school for him, and I think like I'm comfortable saying he'll probably be a decent like mid-range shooter. The thing with shooting in big men a lot of the times is people think like if your big can shoot a three, that fixes a lot of lineup problems. But in the reality, they just don't take them at a high enough volume for it to really matter. If you're taking 2 threes a game, it's not changing the course of the game that much in how your team plays a whole lot. If they're spot up for Mo Bamba, for example, right? Like you guys are well aware, I'm a Lakers fan. I watched a bit of him this year, obviously. He's a spot up 3-point shooter who waits for someone to create something so that he can take that three at the top of the key. That's a value to have, but at the same time, if it's happening, 2 or 3 times during the game, it's not changing a whole lot. So if none of these guys to me really project as like more than that as shooters, being like, maybe an occasional three here or there as a spot up guy. I think all three guys have the potential to be really solid next to Paolo as rim protectors. But the flip side of that is if they're not shooting at a high enough volume, I think it cramps the court a bit for what Franz and Paolo's greatest strengths would be, right? Which is getting downhill. I think that's where they operate the best. And it goes back to like kind of what I was saying, where you want to optimize your 2 best players. I think for me, those guys might do so defensively. Like I think Lively's a pretty solid ground coverage guy. I think Drace is an awesome help defender. And I think Leonard Miller is got a lot of potential. I know a lot of people don't buy it, but I actually think he has like upside to be a primary rim protector because I think he's got the athletic traits to really do so. It's more so just about making the right reads and when to time stuff. So all those 3 guys, I think, have the opportunity to be like primary rim protectors. And I get the reasoning as to why Magic fans would want that after watching them this year. And that's never been Wendell's calling card. But I think none of those 3 guys optimize who your best players are. So for me, I would love Taylor Hendricks as a Magic fan. Like I think he does shoot the 3 at a high enough volume and can be that sort of rim protector to give you sort of both sides of that. So I'm fully in agreement with Malik on that pick. But the other names as bigs, I'm not sure I'd be so keen to do that at 11. Like if I had another pick at 20 or something, I might consider it more. But none of those guys will probably fall there. And I also don't think, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, it's probably the best pick at 11.
I've always been like, I like Lively. I like the idea of, I don't know those other guys as well, but I like the idea of, potentially addressing some better rim protection in this draft, but not at the sake of 11. If they were to go for someone like that, one of those guys, it would be to like, hey, let's move back a handful of spots and gain something in return, even if it is a super protected first that, may or may not convey, but it's something we can toss into a trade or something like that. It's like something like that is attractive to me. If they want to use 6 and drop back to 16 or 17 or whatever the case may be, or whatever 20. Whoever has the opportunity to draft Lively, that makes sense for the Magic, or player X. That's sort of my thought process there. But I'm also fine with like the Magic team, like the backup center. Like this is a year where they're hoping to figure out if Jonathan Isaac can play again. I don't have much faith in that, but like, cool. Let's see what there is there. Like, go sign a random center on a 1-year deal and see how it works out. Shoot, even run it back with Goga for a year, like, or Mo Wagner. Like, that's fine for like, I don't expect this Magic team to address every single issue this offseason. It's just It's not going to be, not long term at least, it's just impossible. It's not how team building works, and like, we can probably be okay if not everything is like perfect going into day one, of the season. So sort of my thought right there. Malik, I'm going to pass this to you first. And maybe you've already said it, but maybe not. Like, what is your dream draft day situation? You can do any trade, any movability. All the other GMs are like, fuck yeah, Malik, you have the best trade idea possible, or, the draft goes just your way. Give me your dream scenario. You can even include pick 36 if you want to do that. And Stone, I'm going to pass this same question to you.
Right. Well, I guess just playing it safe, I would say you're getting a Sora Thompson, Taylor Hendricks falls to you at 11, and then somehow you're able to have a center drop to you at 36, like the young center out of Barcelona, James Nagy or something like that. To me, that's the dream scenario for that. The real pie in the sky scenario would be where you can trade up for Scoot Henderson, still get kind of a mid-round pick, like whether it's Bryce Sensabaugh or something like that in that mid-first round, and still keep your second-round pick somehow. So that's I would limit it to that, like the pie in the sky one where you somehow get Scoot and a guy, and everyone else is just cursing you as a franchise because you've somehow ruined the league that way. But a little more realistically is to get a Soar, like Taylor Hendricks, and then like I said, getting a big that maybe you can stash overseas for a year, and then comes and really is part of your lineup. So that's what I would say.
Cool. Love it. Stone, what about you, man?
Yeah, I would concur with Malik. Like the A1 like scenario would be coming away with Scoot Henderson for this team. I think that's the best case scenario. Even if it involves moving both the picks and adding one or two young players who aren't, like franchise cornerstones. But in the scenario they keep the picks, I would be ecstatic as a Magic fan if they came away with two of the following, like 4 guys, which would be names we already mentioned, like Cam Whitmore and Taylor Hendricks, probably at 6, one of those 2 guys. And then at 11, one of Grady Dick and Bryce Sensabaugh. Like, I think as long as you come away with 2 of those 4 names, for me, I know everyone's going to have different names, but for me, sure. I think coming away with 2 of those 4 would be like an A+ draft for the Magic.
Can I hop back to you for real quick? You said Hendricks at 6. You think he's a 6 potential?
I think he's 11 on my board, but I think if you want Taylor Hendricks on your team, you're probably going to have to draft him at 6. I think he's probably going to be gone before. I agree 11.
Too. Yeah.
That's sort of where I've been placing him, but then I heard like Malik talk about him at 11, and then I'm like, well, maybe I'm wrong, and I don't know about this draft, so maybe going for him at 6 is a reach. I have no idea.
But you never know. It always changes.
Hendricks at 6 seems like a great option.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I'm hoping for. I think you would have to take him that early to get him because I think his stock is going up. It's funny. I think guys like a Jarris Walker or something like that are more likely to drop to 11 than a guy like Hendricks, because I think there's some teams that Walker only fits with certain teams. Maybe doesn't even fit with the Magic, in my opinion. Don't tell anybody. But he's a guy who might end up being there at 11. Then you have some real questions and to kind of answer for yourself. So we'll see. I'm
gonna jump and give my couple dream scenarios.
Yeah.
totally agree. Trading up for Scoot makes a lot of sense if possible, and the price is within reasonable, a reasonable tag to get up there. He's fantastic. People are gonna be like, well, he can't shoot either. He's got a pathway to growing to shoot, in my opinion. Where no disrespect to Markelle Fultz, he's a fine point guard. But he just does. He's got an injury that he has to manage the rest of his career, and I just don't ever see it being a thing where he is respected, where Scoot has that possibility. So that's the difference in shooting for the listeners on my approach with Scoot there, and why it would make sense to get him and eventually move off of Fultz at some point. Because again, Fultz is up for a contract extension, and you got to decide if you or free agency in another year, and you got to decide, like, is he a part of your long-term future? A lot of reasons that he would. So I'm not anti-Fultz there, but I also like Scoot. My dream situation outside of that, and again, I would be totally comfortable and not upset if we use both picks, but I do think it would be some form of trading out with one of the picks, or trading back and gaining another asset. I really do want to see if we can come out of this draft with another future first-round pick. And I just also have a hard time truly seeing a pathway to two young players drafted that high having an optimal path to development and reaching their true potential on this team with how many people this Magic without a consolidation trade happening. I just with the people that we think will be here for the next couple of years, I just wonder, are we going to stunt their growth too early? And I am very much a believer of so many people don't hit their potential and just be okay because they don't get the right path and are drafted to the wrong team. Like Naismith, maybe for an example, or Moody or Kuminga. Maybe Franz looks different on a different team and is not the same type of player he is with the Magic, because he had the right opportunity with us. And so that's just kind of my thought process there on why I'm pretty adamant about trading one of them out. And I also love the idea of having another pick to cool, it's time to make a fucking trade and go big. And we have 2 extra picks and not just one at this point. And so that means we get to keep one of our own a little bit longer, or something like that. So kind of my thought process there. But really, I'm this Magic team, they have Paulo, they have Franz, they have some good young guys on this team. Whatever happens, we're going to be fine. And the team should be better after this draft than beforehand. So I'm really psyched. Stone and Malik, we've been chatting for on camera about 57 minutes, off camera a little over an hour. I just want to say thank you both for your time. You've been very generous. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. I feel more educated leaving this conversation than I did going into it. You guys have given me some things to think about, both of you, and some things I'm definitely going to be looking into. Stone, I'm going to kick it off to you. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and your work with Upside Swing?
Yeah, I co-host the Upside Swings podcast, where basically it's all things draft. If you want to, really nerd out about prospects and get into the super duper nitty gritty, we'll do it over there. We also have a website, upsideswings.com, that has all of our big boards and all the episodes and just brief notes if you don't want to listen to the whole thing for each episode. And then you could follow me at report_court on Twitter. Anything I do draft related or any content related things I do concerning the draft, I'll put over there. So I appreciate you having me on. It's a blast talking draft, especially Magic. I love the Magic. So again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And man, I love the look of your website. It's very flows and moves easy, and that is a very important thing when it comes to this type of stuff for me. I wanted to ask you one more question. I don't have to go super deep. What's your prediction for the Magic next season? Not necessarily draft, just season success and where they go.
I think I'll say the Magic make a play-in seed.
Sick.
Yeah, whether they win or not, I'm not sure, but I think they at least make a play-in seed.
I love it. That's cool. Stone, thank you so much for joining. Malik, man, let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, I just want to point out what Stone's their not only website, but their podcast, Upside Swings. I love it because it meets that specific sweet spot of if you want to seem smart or get smart about the draft, but you don't have the time to spend all the time doing all the scouting, you can really dial down to a specific player, listen to their podcast where they just like talk for an hour on one dude, and all of them have made these specific opinions about him. And all of a sudden, you're almost too smart. You're like overconfident about a guy that you haven't even seen, and it's beautiful. I love it. You can just have the hottest of hot takes and say stuff about
episode tomorrow.
Oh, it's beautiful. and they do timestamps in their podcast, so you can go right to that player. Don't have to waste time listening to guys you don't want to hear about. So, like I said, definitely recommend Upside Swings. Listen to the podcast I did with them a couple weeks ago. It's great stuff. My Twitter, of course, is Malik G. I have plenty of takes. Most of them are awful, so seek me out and come to them for that. You know what I'm saying? And I do want to give a shout out to Steven for tonight. My man was sick, not feeling well, came through, brought it. You would never know that he was a walking wounded, had his Jordan game tonight and stuff. So game. Just always, I appreciate him as a man and as a co-host and stuff. So just I want everybody to remember what he was going through for this podcast and just enjoy it. So
tickle in the back of my throat, but I appreciate the flu game reference there. Yeah. Anyways, thanks, fellas. Appreciate it. Thank you, Magic fans and Close Up Magic listeners. Check out Malik and Stone. Follow them, follow their work, and let's go Magic. Couple weeks to the draft. Peace.
Sweet.